It's fascinating how Dubai captures the world's attention with its lights, skyscrapers, and breathtaking shopping malls. But do you know what few people notice behind this brilliance? The gears that drive this ultra-modern city hide stories that would make even the most dazzled tourist question its reality. Luxury, for example, does not always reflect progress for everyone, and here arises a contradiction that few discuss. It's like admiring a jewel without wondering where it came from. On one hand, Dubai is a magnet for millionaires and international brands, but on the other, it's also a stage for striking inequalities. Think about it. While tourists delight in dancing fountains, workers endure inhumane work shifts. And we're not even talking about the past. This is happening here and now. It's like watching a movie where the extras have even more intense stories than the main characters. The city is a global showcase, but what is out of sight is often even more impressive. Another point that raises eyebrows among those who seek to understand Dubai is the contrast between modernity and the strict rules governing the place. Here, criticisms or innocent actions in the West can get you into serious trouble. Have you ever heard of tourists who were arrested for simple gestures? Exactly. Behind the curtains of the urban show, there are rules that many could not imagine exist. This, of course, only adds more layers to the enigma that is Dubai, where freedom can be a luxury rarer than its jewels. Curious, isn't it? And while you process all of this, the story delves even deeper. Let's take another step and explore how all of this is sustained or perhaps sacrificed to maintain the appearance of an ideal city. Wait until you discover what truly sustains this empire of glamour and innovation. Behind the imposing buildings and landmarks that define Dubai's skyline, there is a reality that few dare to investigate. The invisible force that truly built this city. Immigrant workers, coming from countries like India and Pakistan, have their stories marked by dreams and sacrifices. Imagine boarding a plane to a distant land, attracted by the promise of a better life, only to discover that the cost of the dream is greater than one can pay. In Dubai, heavy labor is often carried out under conditions that would challenge even the most resilient. The desert heat gives no respite. Yet these workers endure exhaustive outdoor shifts, building the monuments that enchant the world. Many of them live in overcrowded accommodations without adequate ventilation, while carrying bricks and cement under extreme temperatures. It's not uncommon to hear stories of people who, due to dehydration, go days without urinating, which says a lot about the brutality of their work. If for those who visit Dubai the feeling is one of luxury, for these individuals, it is an unequal exchange where wealth is built at the expense of dignity. Another detail that escapes the public eye is the confiscation of passports, a practice that traps workers in almost irreversible situations. Without the document, they cannot leave the country, creating a cycle of indebtedness and exploitation. To make matters worse, companies that face financial difficulties often delay or even fail to pay wages, leaving many families dependent on these workers in situations of misery. It is a clear example of how dreams can turn into silent nightmares, kept away from the spotlight. But what about the consequences? Wouldn't the situation call for change? The issue is complex and leads us to reflect on the role of modernity in a scenario of inequalities. And meanwhile, Dubai continues to grow, driven by a force that is rarely recognized, but that sustains its grandeur. So, what happens when the engine that fuels this development is put to the test? Let's explore even more. Dubai is a brilliant and sometimes dazzling example of how to transform a dependent economy into a diversified empire. At the end of the 20th century, the city began to tread a path that few imagined possible. It left behind oil dependency and became a global center for tourism, commerce, and innovation. It's almost as if the city had decided not to put all its eggs in one basket, betting on various economic fronts. And it worked, at least in financial terms. Between 2000 and 2005, Dubai experienced impressive economic growth, with rates reaching 13% per year. But this didn't happen by chance. Strategies such as flexible tax laws attracted large investors and corporations, making Dubai a refuge for the richest and most powerful people in the world. Imagine this. A city that grew so quickly that its local population represents only 5% of its inhabitants today. All this growth was sustained by an intelligent revenue model that mixes business, tourism, and technological innovation. Tourism, of course, is one of the stars of this equation. Dubai knew how to turn its unique characteristics and even its limitations into irresistible attractions. With skyscrapers that defy gravity, malls that resemble cities, and exclusive experiences such as desert safaris, the city has become one of the most sought-after destinations in the world. Before the pandemic, the sector moved around $28 billion a year. It is no exaggeration to say that every detail was designed to impress. But while luxury and innovation attract the world's eyes, what happens behind the scenes? Perhaps sustainability and ethical values behind all this still need attention. And it is precisely this duality that makes Dubai so fascinating. But wait, because there is something even more intriguing in this plot. The rules that define who can or cannot express themselves freely in this shimmering oasis. Under Dubai's seductive shine lies a reality that few know. The rigid rules that dictate what can or cannot be said, done, or even thought. The city, which seems like a paradise for tourists, operates under a system that blends authoritarianism and religious laws. For unsuspecting visitors, something as simple as showing affection in public or posting an opinion online can lead to serious consequences. It's a silent reminder that behind the luxury, there are invisible limits that should not be crossed. The stories of repression go far beyond detained tourists. Local residents, journalists, and even royalty face the heavy hand of power when they dare to challenge norms. Have you heard about Sheikha Latifah? She tried to escape the control of her own father, but was captured and kept under confinement. Situations like this show that even those at the top of society are not immune to these dynamics. It's like living in a golden bubble, but without the air of freedom. And for those who think this doesn't affect daily life, it's important to understand that repression has a profound impact. Government critics, activists, and even academics face arbitrary imprisonment simply for expressing their ideas. This creates a climate where silence often speaks louder than any word. Imagine living in a place where the internet, social networks, and even informal conversations can be monitored. It's a reality that seems taken from a dystopian movie, but it's the daily life for many there. This tension between economic progress and the absence of freedom is one of Dubai's greatest paradoxes. And while this reality generates discussions worldwide, a curious aspect still stands out. How does a city so rich and modern deal with basic challenges like infrastructure? But this is a story that reveals yet another intriguing face of this urban enigma. It is curious how Dubai, with all its splendor, still faces challenges that many cities resolved decades ago. The issue of the sewage system, for example, is almost unbelievable for those who see the city as a symbol of modernity. Despite the skyscrapers that dominate the horizon, including the imposing Burj Khalifa, the city uses a rudimentary solution: trucks to transport tons of waste daily. Doesn't it seem contradictory? A city that challenges the limits of engineering still struggles with such basic problems. The impact of this goes beyond inconvenience. Endless truck queues on the streets generate traffic, pollution, and even irregular waste disposal. There are reports of drivers who, due to hours-long waits, simply dump waste in the desert or the sea, causing serious environmental damage. Imagine the contrast. On one hand, dancing fountains and futuristic landscapes. On the other, environmental issues reflecting a lack of consistent urban planning. Even with announced investments to modernize the system by 2025, the problem exposes a larger gap: the difficulty in keeping pace with accelerated growth. The city expanded at an impressive speed, but this also created bottlenecks in its basic infrastructure. The Burj Khalifa, for example, produces 15 tons of waste daily, a significant weight for a system already overloaded. This is the reality that hides beneath the shimmering surface of the metropolis. But is this problem limited to sewage? The issue opens space for broader reflections on how urban growth needs to balance sustainability and quality of life. And this leads us to think about the limits of modernity in a city that lives on the frontier between the possible and the necessary,